Hey guys! So I noticed a lot of artists posting their drawing process while doing voiceovers about whatever they felt like, and I thought that looked fun, so I'm taking a shot at it. So a little backstory on this piece. My last year of college, I took a character design class, and one of the assignments was to sketch something like 50 animal characters. One of mine was a Siamese cat I named Kwanjai. I'd kind of had an idea for a Thai character in the form of a Siamese cat ever since I remember watching a Cats 101 segment and being surprised by the notion that Siamese cats hail from Thailand. It seems like a stupid thing to not realize since they're called Siamese cats, but somehow I got it in my head that they were a Chinese breed. I didn't know how I'd come to this conclusion until I remembered a show I used to watch called Sagwa the Chinese Siamese Cat. That show was basically my first exposure to the breed, and having it set in China inadvertently gave my child self a lot of confusion on that front. But what is Sagwa the Chinese Siamese Cat? Well, it started as a children's book written by Chinese-American author Amy Tan, who later adapted it into an animated TV show which aired on PBS Kids from 2001 to 2002. The show follows Sagwa and her family, her parents Mama and Baba, her big brother Donghua, and her little sister Shigwa. They lived in a Chinese village that appears to be set during the late Qing dynasty, inside a palace where they're cared for by the magistrate and his family in exchange for the cats writing his scrolls for him. Sagwa also has this bat friend who's clumsy and blind because... bat? I remember as a kid I would watch the show because I would watch pretty much any cartoon that had cats in it, but I also don't remember it being among my favorites. I think it also only lasted a season, so it wasn't in my conscious long. It was basically just what I watched while waiting for Dragon Tales to come on or something. But recently I've been thinking about it more and more and wondering if there was more to the show than what I originally got out of it. So I revisited the series, and I gotta say, I might like it more as an adult than I did as a kid. Of course, it helped that the show was centered on a family of cats, with the humans being kinda secondary, but I also just love the whole aesthetic with the Chinese-inspired score, the settings and architecture, and just the small details. Now, I don't know how accurate everything is to the time and place, but since the whole franchise is manned by a Chinese woman, I don't expect there to be too much tomfoolery, especially by 2001 standards. I also feel like the stories of each episode were a bit more unique and kind of their own thing compared to other shows I was watching at the time. I'm not sure how preschool shows are like nowadays, but when I was little, it was a lot of shows with either really basic moral lessons or shows that stuck to a very strict and repetitive formula. Sagwa is maybe not the most revolutionary, but I feel like there's more of an emphasis on the narrative and how the characters interact, with the morals of each episode kind of woven into that, instead of the other way around. It's a subtler approach to teaching kids that I think I've come to appreciate more as I grow older, but that could just be that I'm well old enough to know to eat my vegetables and wait my turn, and I don't like being beaten over the head with it. I'm well past the target audience for shows like this, so I think the fact that I still manage to stay engaged with it is a testament to the care that went into it. I will say there were some elements of it that were a little alienating when I first started watching. For one, character dialogue is kind of slow-paced, which is pretty common in shows for a preschool audience, and is probably to help little kids keep up with what's going on, so I can't really fault it for that. It's just a bit strange if you try to watch those shows as an adult. Though I will say the pacing in some episodes is a bit jarring. I can't quite describe it, but it sometimes feels like scenes kind of jump cut into each other, or things progress unnaturally fast, almost like there were a few storyboards missing in some parts. But I don't think that's unique to this show, and it was probably done that way to constrain the story to the 11-minute time slot. To describe the characters, Sagwa is of course the main one. She's adventurous and playful, and is always looking for an excuse to have fun. However, she can be a bit sensitive to being made fun of, and may try to hide aspects of herself if she's mocked for it, such as the episode where she gets rid of a collar that's a family heirloom because it's ugly and causes other characters to laugh at her, or the episode where she got clay stuck in her fur, prompting the magistrate's cook to give her an impromptu bad haircut to get it off, and when her bald patches got her made fun of by her siblings, she started telling bigger and bigger lies about how it happened to garner sympathy. But she also has a fairly solid moral compass and will own up to mistakes when she makes them or behaves badly, basically always telling the truth in the end. Pretty standard fare for a protagonist in a show like this, but nonetheless a decent role model with enough character flaws to be her own character and relatable to the audience. Dongwa is Sagwa's older brother. He's rambunctious and kind of blunt, if not a bit rude at times, such as the episode where he flat out told his great-uncle, who's a history buff, that he hates history. He's also not too fond of doing work and would rather avoid it when he can, such as the episode where he used an injury to take advantage of Sagwa and have her do things for him, like bring him food and do his chores. But ultimately he grows guilty over bad behavior and will often apologize in earnest when he upsets someone, even if it takes a bit of payback and humility on his part at times. Shigwa is Sagwa's younger sister. As the baby of the family, she's very spry and playful, but is fairly sensitive about the age difference between her and her siblings. She takes great offense to being called little or a baby, and often tries to prove herself and keep up with everyone else. In one episode, she gets irritated over Sagwa telling her she's playing with a toy wrong and threatens to run away. In another, she gets mad at Dongwa just for stating she was a baby when a certain event happened. If she feels like she's being talked down to, she will often run off by herself or try to prove herself in some way. But she doesn't stay mad for long, and her siblings accommodate her into their play however they can. Mama is Sagwa's mother, and is often the one keeping after the kittens. She calls them to meals, tells them what work they should do, and scolds them when they speak or act out of turn. But for how harsh her orders could get at times, she is ultimately just looking out for them, and wants them to be safe and grow into responsible older cats. Baba, Sagwa's father, doesn't discipline the kittens quite as much, but is arguably a bit more strict when he does. He is also a bit of a stickler for loyalty and tradition, and tends to appeal to authority. In the first episode, Mama feels uneasy about the magistrate's harsh new no singing rule he wants them to pen down on a scroll, but Baba reminds her that his order is final and that they should listen to him, stating, "We are only cats, we cannot change the world." Fufu is a character that probably would have annoyed me in any other show. He's a bat who's friends with Sagwa, and often shows up in episodes around the halfway point to help Sagwa through a crisis. He's a bit of a comic relief character, and in concept he sounds kind of annoying, with his clumsiness and kind of goofy, high, raspy voice, but I actually found myself more charmed by him than anything. He's written into the myth that bats are blind, and as such he dons a pair of broken glasses and frequently bumps and crashes into things while flying. But unlike a lot of comic relief characters, he's not written as a useless idiot. He's very supportive and even helpful in a lot of episodes. It very much feels like they wrote him as a character first, rather than a supplier of cheap laughs or catchphrases they could put on a t-shirt. Part of that may just be that it's a PBS kids show and they don't want to potentially create a bad role model, but it's much appreciated and a bit of fresh air from the Patrick Stars and Sheens of shows aimed at older kids. I think his design is pretty cute too, with his little fangs and everything. I'd get a plushie of him. There are also various minor characters around the palace. There's the magistrate, a rather large man who enjoys eating noodles. He can come off a bit demanding at times and comes up with a lot of new rules for the village almost on a whim, but in the end he expresses appreciation for his family, his people, and those who work for him. There's also the magistrate's wife, Tai Tai, who can be a bit irritable and greedy. In one episode, where Shigwa is believed to be an incarnation of a princess, she expresses excitement about how Shigwa is going to make her famous. And in another episode, she expresses disdain when a street peddler visits the palace on a rainy day to sell toys to the kids. However, in episodes where she gets a lot of screen time, she will often show a humbler side to herself and express love and appreciation for her family. She also has 3 dogs, which she tends to keep in her sleeves, which is apparently a thing Chinese royals did back in the day, and these dogs don't get along well with the cats. For even more minor characters, there's the magistrate's 3 daughters, who don't really have enough of a presence to have their own distinct personalities. They just kind of hang around the palace and play together. There's also the scroll reader and the cook, 2 employees for the magistrate who are generally not on screen long except to carry out orders. They each get a sort of subplot in different episodes where they overwork themselves trying to appease the magistrate, and then the magistrate realizes they need a break and offers to help them out. The scroll reader maybe gets a bit more of a presence as he shows up a lot to collect the scrolls and read them in the village square, but the cook arguably has a bit more going on as he seems to also be something of a caretaker for the cat family, but ultimately they don't show up that often. A prevailing theme in a lot of Sagwa episodes is the idea of family bonds, family legacy, and looking out for one another. There's an episode where Sagwa learns to appreciate a collar that's a family heirloom. There's one where Sagwa and Dongwa have to look after a sick Shigwa, and there's one where they discover their family is a part of a royal lineage. The first episode is already pretty interesting in that it plays out like a folk tale. It essentially tells the story of how Sagwa, and by extension Siamese cats in general, got their dark markings, claiming that they used to be white cats who stained their faces, paws, and tails with ink. This episode kind of surprised me when I first saw it, since you normally don't see folk tales show up in shows like this. Maybe it's a fear it might give kids the wrong impression if you show them folk tales too young or in the wrong context, but most of the folk tales I read as a kid came in picture book form, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it was kind of cool to see one told in animated form. And in later episodes during flashback sequences when Sagwa is younger, the cat family is portrayed as plain white. So this doesn't seem to have just been a story told by Mama, but an actual canon within the show, so it's kinda neat to have that extra bit of continuity. There's also the episode All Grown Up, which is sort of this dual inner character conflict where Shigwa is upset that she's too young to do a lot of things and just wants to be older, while Baba struggles with growing old and wishes he were young again. In the end, they both realize that there are pros and cons to both, with youth providing energy and exuberance and age providing wisdom and experience. I think what I liked about this episode was the dual conflict playing off of each other and a sort of showing the grass is always greener perspective to kids. It also introduced a conflict for the parent character, which is something that's rarely, if ever, done in kids shows, even ones where parents exist and are enough of a presence to have their own personalities. Another episode I like is Precious Gift, where Shigwa finds what she thinks is a toy in the palace garden and carries it away to play with it, but it turns out to be Tai Tai's missing jade necklace, which she had gotten from her father, and as such is distraught that she can't find it. While the episode is mainly about Shigwa having an inner conflict over whether to keep the necklace for herself or return it to its rightful owner, where I believe this episode really shines is in Tai Tai's character development and how she interacts with her husband. In any other episode, I feel like she might have been upset about the missing necklace because it was super expensive or something, but instead it has sentimental value and that provides a strong dramatic hook for the audience. She also has some sweet exchanges with the magistrate as he promises to help her find it, and enlists the help of the cook and the scroll reader to search the entire palace. Over the course of the episode, she comes to terms with the possibility it may be lost for good, conceding that she still has memories of the good times she had with her father. Ultimately, she does get it back when Shigwa returns it to her, albeit she had broken it on accident, but Tai Tai isn't mad at Shigwa and even thanks her for returning it. I like how this episode took a character that was kind of unlikable at times and showed her more humble, caring side. I also like seeing her and the magistrate express love and care for one another through their dialogue and kind gestures toward each other, and this episode is a prime example of that dynamic. One episode I thought was pretty interesting and unique, at least in point of view, is Bado and the Lantern Festival. This episode actually centers on one of the magistrate's daughters, though I'm kind of assuming only one of them is, because if I'm being honest, they're all pretty interchangeable in design and personality, but I digress. So the royal family attends the Lantern Festival, a celebration at the end of the Chinese New Year. Each daughter brings one of the kittens with them, as well as some money their parents gave them to spend at the festival. At one point, Bado and Sagwa get separated from the group, but every time she asks someone for help, no one believes she is the magistrate's daughter. This offends Bado, as she seems to have a bit of a do-you-know-who-I-am attitude toward everyone, and them not believing she's a princess greatly frustrates her. Soon, though, she meets an old woman who appears to be homeless, and she says some sweet things to Bado and Sagwa and expresses hope that the new year will be lucky for her. Bado feels sorry for her and gives the woman her coat and spending money. The overall message of learning to be humble was nice, but what I found particularly interesting about this episode is that it's told almost entirely from the human's point of view. Like many shows of this type, the humans can't understand what the cats are saying, so whenever we're shifted to the perspective of the human characters, the cats only meow. Aside from, I believe, one scene of the kittens interacting, Sagwa only meows and gestures, as the story is less about her and more about Bado's character development. As a kid, I know this episode would have bored me, but as an adult, I appreciate it a lot. For one episode I wasn't much a fan of, the first that comes to mind is Dongwa's best friend. It wasn't so much the premise that left me wanting as much as the pacing. At times it kind of felt like the writers weren't on the same page with what was going on. So basically, the kittens meet a rather charismatic cat by the name of Wan Tom, who is well liked by the other cats in town. Dongwa quickly takes a liking to him and starts sucking up to him, and Wan Tom responds well, calling Dongwa his new pal. What ensues is essentially a string of Wan Tom taking advantage of Dongwa and Dongwa being oblivious or in denial about it. There's a bit of a resolution at the end, but not one that feels particularly satisfying. Now on its nose, the idea of Dongwa getting taken advantage of could probably work as an episode. It feels in character as he's sometimes shown to want to fit in and be seen as cool by the other cats. But this episode's handling of story progression left me kind of confused over what was going on. At the beginning of the episode, it seemed like Dongwa wanted to be friends with Wan Tom, but as the episode progressed, it almost seemed more like he just wanted someone to practice lion dancing with, and was set on doing it with Wan Tom until Wan Tom ditched him. There was also never a moment where he fully realized Wan Tom was using him, and he didn't apologize to his sisters for pushing them away whenever they criticized Wan Tom's behavior. The episode ends with Dongwa asking his sisters to lion dance with him. They refuse and storm off in a huff, and another cat he talked to like once earlier in the episode comes by to lion dance with him. The episode ends on a happy note, I guess, but nothing gets resolved. It almost feels like there were 2 episodes going on and they got stitched together and shaved down to 11 minutes. I suppose one episode that's particularly relevant to this video is The Cat in the Wind, as there's a heavy emphasis on the power of art. Mama tells the kittens a story about their ancestor Ming Meow, a cat who could draw pictures that would come to life, and his uncanny abilities eventually landed him a job as the local magistrate's official calligrapher. His special talent is the reason why Sagwa's family can draw and write, setting them apart from the other cats. The full story of Ming, which included some fable-style elements about good versus evil, was engaging in its own right. But the episode ends in kind of a curious way. The kittens lament that their drawings can't come to life like Ming's did, and question if it's a true story. Mama responds by drawing a picture of a butterfly and tossing it into the air so that the wind catches it, sending it soaring out the window and into the night. The kittens become awestruck and run onto the balcony to watch the drawing fly through the air, and as they do, the butterfly comes to life and flies off the page. Now, my first reaction to this was one of shock. Had they really just introduced magical elements into this show? Up until this part in my viewing, the show had been pretty thoroughly grounded in realism, well apart from the cats writing scrolls thing. And I think I was so ready to accept that the butterfly had just actually come to life because in the first episode, Mama had told the story of the Siamese cats getting their markings from ink stains because of something Sagwa did, and the flashback scenes in later episodes cemented that as something that actually happened within the show's canon. So if that story was true, this story about magic drawings must also be right. But then I noticed that the butterfly only came off the page when the kittens were looking at it and Mama was out of the shot. So then, did the drawing not actually come to life, but the kittens imagined it doing so? I thought this was also plausible, as in the beginning of the episode, Sagwa draws a flower for Sigwa, who imagines what it might smell like. I'm honestly not sure which would make more sense, for magic to be real or for Mama's story to have just been a story. It's almost as if the episode itself is leaving it up to the audience to draw their own conclusions, something that art constantly invites us to do, and something that is very thematically appropriate for the episode's message. It's just such a clever detail and a level of ambiguity I'm not used to seeing in shows aimed at preschoolers. So, I guess I should ponder the question, would I recommend this show to others? It's hard to say because I think it depends a lot on your preferences. If you're like me and you like cats and/or have an interest in Chinese culture, the show might have something to offer. As you've probably gauged by now, the show delves pretty far into Chinese traditions and aesthetic, but not so deeply that it's alienating to an American audience. I personally learned a few things as I watched it, even if it was something brief like a shot of a musician playing an instrument I've never seen before. And of course, not every episode is about China. Most of them are actually about characters learning some life lesson or learning to respect one another, like most shows in its genre, though integrated well into the show's writing so it feels engaging rather than preachy, to me anyway. I will say I don't know how kids today would react to it. 2D animation, especially the hand-drawn variety, seems to be all but extinct in just about every facet of mainstream animated shows and movies. I personally really like the style, and I think it lends well to the very vibrant and flat colors, almost like the style you might find on an old Chinese tapestry or something. But for kids who are used to watching Doc McStuffins and Paw Patrol, or even Flash animated shows, I'm not sure how they would feel about it, or maybe I'm just exposing myself as a clueless fuddy-duddy who doesn't understand today's kids. But honestly, I don't think you have to be a little kid to get something out of it. Like I said, I revisited it as an adult and noticed a lot of things that definitely flew over the head of child me. If all I've said about it sounds interesting, I don't think it would hurt to give it a try. Granted, since it's a short-lived show from the early 2000s, home media releases are scarce, and it's not on any streaming services that I'm aware of, but many of the episodes have been ripped online, and that's where I found them to make this video. Of course, the quality varies from buzzy VHS rips to straight-up HD clips, but hopefully you can find enough to sort of get the idea. Well, that just about wraps things up here. I hope you found this somewhat interesting. I certainly did making this video. I have more ideas of video topics I'd like to cover, so I hope to make more at some point. Until then, thanks for watching and have a great day.